Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining me. Today is Thursday because good things happen on Thursday. I'm Marissa and this is Art of Heart. Today's guest has an incredible story that is literally decades in the making. She's not only a good personal friend and a colleague, but her story is something that is so bright and so wonderful. I cannot wait for her to share with you. So, Amy, welcome.
Thank you.
So, tell me a little bit about yourself. Like, who are you? How are you showing up today?
In my career, I'm in sales. I've been in sales for over 20 years. So just super successful career of managing and building sales teams across the country and managing sales processes. But most importantly, I'm a Nana. So my granddaughter's 4.5 and a mother to two and a wife.
That's fantastic. So I know that people are probably like, "Wow, she looks really young to be a nana." So
I get that a lot.
I know. So we're going to start a little bit. We're actually going to talk a little bit about how all this happened so quickly in your life, and why you're so young. And as we get into your first heart, this story literally started decades ago. And so set the stage on what happened. What was it, 1999?
9.
So tell us about 1999.
Yeah, so I had just turned 18 and I met a man who's actually my younger son's father, who introduced me to his uncle Kerry. And um, he asked me if I knew of a place called Heaven. And I was like, oh, that would be awesome if I did, but I didn't at the time. So he just asked me like if he could tell me about heaven, would I be interested? And I was like, yeah, sure, because I live in hell every day, you know. It was just a really challenging time in my life, like living under a bridge and being a young mom. So he just said there was a scripture that if I could, believe in my heart that Jesus was Lord and confess with my mouth that God raised him from the dead, that I would be saved. And then I'd go to heaven. And so I prayed that prayer with him on June 7th of 1999.
What was that day like for you?
The best day, literally best day of my life. So yeah, it was the world was so bright and my heart was just exploding. So it was great.
I know that you had had a very rough childhood, to say the least, and in fact, we were talking the other day about a book that I read when I was a kid, and we're about the same age, right? We're a few months apart, and or a year apart, and I was like, "Hey, did you ever read this book?" And you're like, "No." And I realized it's because we had very different experiences growing up as a child. And so it's wonderful that you had this incredible experience and that your heart was so bright and that it was, you say it's the best day of your life. But I think that it's really important that people understand kind of how hard it was before then and how this simple question of, do you know what heaven is? And would you want to go there if you could? Why that became such a bright point. So can you give us like a synopsis of what maybe childhood and teenage years look like for you?
Yeah, I grew up in like a normal family, you could say, but we had challenges. And without getting into all the gory details, but um, middle class America and just secrets in the family, um, and so I, my parents got divorced when I was 12, and my grandma, who was my world, passed away when I was 13, and so um, from that time, I didn't want to live at home anymore, so I was basically out on the streets until I got pregnant at 14 and had my first son at 15, and it was a lot of work.
A very different teenage experience.
Yeah.
And when you share like you literally lived under a bridge, like that was she literally lived under a bridge. Like it wasn't like
Yeah.
this wonderful safe home environment. And a lot of challenging things happen. And we kind of laugh about, our generation. We lived through a lot of stuff when we were young and we had all of this freedom. And then you said a word the other day that I didn't realize. You were like, "Oh, I was emancipated." And I was like, "You were emancipated?" Like like at that young of an age, you weren't just a mom, but you were responsible for yourself.
Yeah.
And that's something I don't think most people understand what that's like.
Yeah, I remember going to the hospital like when I was pregnant with my first child, and I didn't have a car or way to the hospital, so um yeah, I had to kind of bum rides to the hospital because I had been there like 3 times. I just didn't know what was going on, so I was like, oh, I'm ready to have the baby, whatever. But I worked at a little hamburger joint nearby and did what I had to do. But yeah, I was emancipated because I was a mom, so I had responsibility for myself and my child at the time. Yeah, it was a lot.
It was a lot. It was a lot. And I don't um I as we talk about waypoints. So if you're new to the podcast, we talk about the good, the hard, and the aha moments of life. And as you go through life, we often don't take time to realize and to think about those moments that were really hard. And so when you share this beautiful moment, the juxtaposition is that really hard stuff. And it wasn't like one really hard thing, it was like hard thing after hard thing after hard thing. And then you had this moment where you were saved, and you describe your heart as this the brightest sun and this most vibrant moment.
Yeah.
And then what happened for the next 12 months or so?
It was crazy. So that day, June 7th, 1999, I remember the date because it was the best day of my life. And like, my heart was just I mean, when I say bright, like blinding sun in your eyes, bright, like it was just exploding with joy and peace. And my grandmother actually had always planted seeds in me. Like, she actually sent me to church camp when I was young. And I'm so grateful for that because that obviously draw me towards the Lord later. But I ran a cell group. So I was in church, 5 days a week, running a cell group, which was like a small group locally where, you know, anyone could come. And so I mentored and, other teenage girls or other girls really who were struggling at the time. Cause by this time I was, getting into my 20s. It was like a couple years. So like for 3 years everything was fantastic, right? And then it just started to derail and I started to wander, and so, you know, from there, like for 20 years I wandered back and forth. It was crazy. 20 years sounds like a really long time, but it was a really long time in my life.
Yeah.
In the small scheme of things in God's like universe, it's not, but it was a long time.
And in that 20 years, obviously you had a very vibrant few years when you were walking in your faith and doing the things that fill your cup and that make you feel amazing and aligned. And then things life got in the way. And I think this happens no matter what the point of the story is, like whether it's your walk in faith or whether it's your wellness journey or whether it's you finding the best version of yourself. What happens is life gets loud and it gets other priorities and things compete, and then you're like, oh well, I'll just make this choice instead of that choice. And the next thing you know, 20 years, you're in the middle of this 20-year this time period. So describe like what those 20 years look like.
Oh my gosh, it was just a journey of up and down. So it was crazy because I'm super successful, right? So I had to take care of my kids. By this time I had two. So I have two grown kids now. They're 24 and 29, but you know, I I had to take care of them. So I had to work. So from the hamburger joint at 14 years old, I went into sales. My first sales job was at like a little local, whatever, plumbing outfit. And, but I was just determined, right? I'm like, I'm going to teach my kids a different way. I'm going to teach them work ethic. I'm going to teach them these things. And so I started, and I had to make money. So I started to build a career, and ultimately it was super successful. Climbed the ranks of, look, I didn't have a college degree. I didn't have all the things, right? I didn't have all the experience, but I had the determination. And so,
Yeah.
I was super successful, but in that chasing this American dream, if you will, of like super success, I lost myself and constantly just chasing after what I felt like um, everyone else wanted me to be.
Yeah.
And, just lost in the a chaos of the world and what I thought I was supposed to be, what I thought everyone else wanted me to be. And really I was hurting, lost. It didn't, I stopped going to church, I would go sometimes, but I moved all over across the country. So, like I might find a church here, I might go for a little while, but it just never really felt like church home. Um, and I would always find an excuse why it wasn't good enough or
Yeah.
why
It's
I just
interesting.
had other things to do.
Of course. When we met and we've known each other for many years now, I would have when we first met and worked together, I would have never known that your faith was such a priority in your life because it wasn't something that we talked about. And it wasn't you didn't like show up like that first. You were like super sales focused. Like when I like Amy has sold everything from like roofs to people to like uh disaster restoration stuff to like trucks. Like she has sold all the things, and when she says she's had a very successful career, she's literally the best salesperson I know. But that never came up in conversation. We were talking every day, and it's so interesting because I didn't know that this was something that was so deep in your heart until very recently.
Yeah.
um, and so when you describe that 20 years of like moving around and getting kind of discombobulated almost and putting everybody else's priorities first, what does your heart look like during that time?
So black, just so black and like broken and just black. I mean, literally, like all of the light that had shined through had just gone away. Like you couldn't see any light at all. Um, it was just darkness, complete darkness. So it was tough.
Do you feel like, because I think as I've gone through this journey this year and really kind of like uncovered who I am, it's so surprising to me that so many other people show up every day and they're successful and they have a bright shining face, and these are people I interact with every day, and I had no idea they were lost. I
Yeah.
had no idea that they were feeling so dark inside until I started to talk about, hey, I'm not okay. And then I was like, oh my gosh, me too, I'm not okay.
Yeah.
Did you ever feel like it was okay to tell people that you weren't okay?
No, I mean, and so I only felt it was okay, like if I was the super successful one, right? So I was like, I remember we went on this it was like a challenge for me. It was a trip, like the top 10 percentile in our organization got to go on this trip, right? And I remember getting there and like I was the first person to raise my hand, like, oh hey, who's been here for the second time, right? I'm like the second time, but nobody had been there 3 times in a row. And I was like, I'm gonna go 3 times in a row. But for me, that was like my me being okay, and I was okay to share that. But through that journey, like I had also gained and lost a lot of weight. So um I remember actually one of my VPs asking me like, do people treat you differently? And I was, because I had lost like 200 pounds in this journey, and it really wasn't because of the weight loss surgery I had had. It was actually because I was actually sick, which I didn't know. um but I just felt like it was never okay to tell people to talk about my faith, because it was kind of one of those like taboo things, right? Like you can't talk about religion and you can't talk about politics at work, right? And so I never felt like it was okay. But there were a few people in my life, career mentors of mine, yourself, and like Amber, who used to work with us, um, who would ask me challenging questions, like, because I was like, how can you communicate with me and nobody else can? Right? And she was like, Amy, I took a bunch of classes on how to communicate. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. you know? Um, but people who could really see me for me, and but even still I was still very hesitant to share my faith. And honestly, recently, my younger son's father, he was like, never he kept making mistakes and kept sharing his faith, and he always prayed for his son. And now my son has a great relationship with him, and I am super grateful for that. But I realized how much courage it takes to talk about your faith in the moments when it's the hardest. And I was like, oh gosh, that's so awesome. I'm so grateful that the Lord had, you know, picked that out for my son, because I was like, I picked the worst man on earth, you know. But honestly, he's such an incredible person just because he constantly prayed for his son and never stopped sharing his faith, all the mistakes that he made. So I have respect for that.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And whether it's like you and I have different bases of our faith, we still have a
Sure.
faith in a higher power, and we can show up with our own separate beliefs and be safe to share with each other. And we're really kind of screaming from the rooftops at this point, like how we feel about, number one, the things that are important to us, but also like what we believe in. And it's okay to believe in whatever you believe in,
Yeah.
but also it's really important to share, and it's really important to have all the space in the world for someone who believes something different. I grew up in a melting pot of religions. I mean, I cannot even go through all of the religions of my very close friends because it is literally the melting pot of the earth. And what I found really dynamic about growing up with so many different people who were living their truths is that there's more similarities than there are differences. And it's so important that we show up and we wear whatever we believe as a badge of honor, and because it
Yeah.
is right,
Yeah.
it, it's so, and that's what your son's father did, is no matter what battles he faced in his own life or what troubles or whatever he was facing, he stood behind the fact that that is who he is and that is what he believes in, and that
Yeah.
is how he shows up every day. A few weeks ago, it's probably been a couple months ago now, time goes by so fast, we were talking about this, and I was going and sharing with you what made me tick, what I call my care and feeding instructions.
Yeah.
And really, like, for me, it's being really clear on showing up as my full authentic self, even if it's not perfect, even if it's not exactly what I need it to be on any given day, and to be true to that, and to talk about, to hear people's stories and share mine,
Yeah.
and to heal from burnout, and to know that joy comes from adventure, wonder, and genuine human connection, and that to shape a life that I'm not running from or hiding from, that this is just my life, this is who I am. And you shared something with me that about your faith and about your love of children and about your love of um, being in your church family and all of these wonderful relationships that you have within that. And I had no idea.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about what's changed recently and your walk back in that light that happened 20 some years ago.
Yeah. So it's crazy because 20 years sounds like a really long time, right? In a personal, like in my life. But like I said, in the big scheme of things, like it's such a minor, um, it just goes so fast, right? But I recently, it was actually my husband's friend. We were out somewhere and he was like, yeah, I go to church. And because I had been going to church, we had been going to a church across the street from our house, and it grew really fast, which is great, right? But I was like, I don't really feel like church home. So we went to visit this church that my husband's friend went to, and I immediately felt like it was church home. I was like, oh my gosh, I finally feel welcome. I feel wanted, you know. And so we went 3 or 4 times, and then finally, pastor's wife came to visit our campus. So we go to like a satellite campus from the main campus, and I knew that the pastors had a past, you know, of some struggles, and so I was like, oh, they can relate, you know. So I finally just said, I give up. I'm going to the front, and I'm just gonna ask her, like, can you please pray with me? I want to surrender my life, and I want to get plugged in, you know. So I was like, I just everything, I just I want to lay it all down, you know. So I did. So I got plugged in, and I have some great women in the church who are mentoring me and, you know, close to me. And even through the struggles now, like life is not perfect, even still, right? It's like I still go through struggles, but I can talk to them and I can be authentic and honest, because one of the biggest things I struggle with is like, oh, is somebody really going to like me for me? Like, if they really know the truth, you know, what's crazy is I was more willing to share like the truth about me that people shouldn't like, or,
Yeah.
um, versus my faith. And I was like, oh, let me start sharing my faith and whatever that might be. Like for anyone, it's like just being able to be your authentic self and say, you know what, here's where I'm at. Here's where I'm struggling, and have people love you for who you are versus who you think they want you to be,
Yeah.
uh, is really empowering, you know? So, yeah. So then I felt like my heart was just the same light was shining through, but it was like a colorful sunset. Like we were driving recently from Sacramento and taking pictures of the sunset. And actually my granddaughter had sent me like these beautiful pictures of sunsets. And I was like, oh, like she called it the red sunset. I was like, oh, you mean like this, you know? And I was like, oh, that's so beautiful. But it's so true. It was like that light shining through now, but through a colorful lens, through my heart. And so it's been about a year now of that journey. So, and I love my little church. They're like 20 to 30 people or whatever. but
Yeah.
um, but when I'm home, I love going there.
So, what sparked this podcast and why I asked Amy to share her story is because last week we were in the car, and we were going to a meeting together, and her light has been so bright, um, for the past like 3 or 4 months. It's been remarkably different. And I kind of, we travel a lot together, and I gave her a hard time. I'm like, why do you have so many suitcases? And she's like, because I have to bring like my Bible and my Bible study stuff. And I start my morning every day with this. The first thing I do is I focus on my faith, and she stands in the word. And I'm like, that's wonderful. I have my own set of things I do, which are really important. And when I don't do them, my whole day seems to get off. So I knew that she had been doing this and been prioritizing, making sure that she touches her faith every day. And so we're in the car, and she was just kind of off. And it wasn't like, she wasn't like awful or mean or crabby, but there was just a shift in her energy. And I looked at her and I go, did you do your normal morning stuff this morning? And she looks at me and she's like, why? And I'm like, did you? And she's like, no. And I was like, I can tell. And there was like this quiet in the car for a few minutes. And she goes, you could tell? And we had this long conversation about alignment and how, um, she didn't realize, and I had only recently realized, that when you are doing the things that you need to do for you, not just that you have faith, but you are walking in your faith, right? Or for me, it's not just that sometimes I show up, as the best version of myself, but every day whatever version I show up is the best version of myself, right? And I do the things to make sure that I am filling and pouring into my own cup, that other people notice. So, when I said to you, "Did you do your morning stuff today?" What did you think?
I was just really taken back because what I realized is it's not like I'm drunk or high necessarily, right? I'm literally just didn't read my word and didn't pray or didn't worship, because that's generally my routine. Like even if it's for 5 minutes or 30 minutes in the morning, if I listen to my worship music and I read a few scriptures or just talk to the Lord, right? My relationship with the Lord, my day, it sets my day so much better. And that particular day I didn't. And it was just really surprising to me. I had chose to sleep in a little bit. I'm like, oh, I'm tired. I'm gonna sleep a little bit more. But it was really surprising to me that you noticed that quickly, because I'm like, I'm not like my behavior is not way off, right? But just my aura, just my how I show up was that much off because I didn't read my word and or worship and or pray that day. And I just thought to myself, I wonder if everyone else recognizes that, because I'm sure my kids do.
Yeah.
I'm sure my husband does. I'm sure my dogs do.
Oh, yeah.
Honestly, you know, like the
Yeah.
people in my life really um are impacted by how I show up. And it was really surprising to me. I was like, wow, you're like that in tune. I mean, we're good friends, right? We're also coworkers, but um but it was really surprising. It really made me stop and think, gosh, one day, you know,
One
like
day.
one
Yeah.
day there is a thousand elsewhere. It's like that's a song, but yeah, I was like one day, 30 minutes of my day can impact the rest of my day and how I show up for others.
It is really it first of all, it gives me chills because it really kind of tells the whole story of what and this is not me telling people what they should be doing. This is me recognizing in my own life and now in people that I love in their life that when we are living in alignment with whatever we believe, and I'm not saying that faith or whatever it is not enough, but what I have learned is that you have to be doing the actions that really align with whatever it is you believe. So for Amy, it's very clear when she starts her morning every morning with the word, even if it's only 5 minutes, her light shines brighter. She's more confident in herself. Her everything just falls into place so much better than when she chooses to sleep in.
Yeah.
Um, and it was just um, so impactful to me this week because we think that is if we believe in whatever the thing is or if we align with whatever the thing is that that is enough, and it just is not. It doesn't fill our cup. It doesn't align us. We have to behave in the way in which shows the result of whatever it is that we believe or whatever our priorities are, right? um and you taking that time in the morning is actually you prioritizing yourself.
Yeah.
um,
Which
right.
is not something I've done the majority of my life, right? I've always thought like, oh, what can I do to invest in others, right? Versus thinking of it first, like, what do I, what can I do to invest in myself to then, allow the Lord to use me um, to invest into others when, you know, at the end of the time or at the end of the day, I might be running on an empty tank, right? Because I haven't invested in myself. And it was just profound to know that it was that simple for you to recognize, like, oh, and also have the courage to ask me, because I've been known to be like, you know I've been known to be one of those, like, people wouldn't necessarily ask me, right? Because I might bite their head off to say, like, hey, Amy, have you done this, and so I appreciated the courage for you to ask me, because I didn't feel challenged. I was like, oh wow, you can really notice that. So thank you for that.
Of
Yeah,
course, I was curious, and I think um we don't often approach life with the right amount of curiosity. And it wasn't in that moment that I was like, ugh, she didn't do her stuff, or like, or that I
right.
was, oh, she's really not, maybe she's really not that into God. Like, it wasn't like that. It was just like, I noticed something different. And I think partly because I'm on this journey of not only showing up as the best version of myself every day, but being my own best friend. And that means prioritizing myself even in that moment of curiosity, because I genuinely wanted to know what was different.
Yeah,
And not from a judgmental way and not from a whatever, just like there's something off, there's something different, right? And
yeah,
I think it's really important that we get curious first with ourselves, because that's when I wrote Lead with Heart, which is um, it's the book that I wrote about healing from burnout. And the very first thing I do every day is check in on my battery and what's my emotion word.
yeah,
And so it starts with that curiosity internally, but then also feeling safe to be curious with others, and for that to be like, because you could have taken it a totally different way, right?
yeah,
You could have been like, whatever, like, you know what I mean, like, what,
yeah,
you think you're all great and like you're trying to like talk crap about me, and it wasn't that at all. We just had this really cool moment. And so as we think about ourselves and our journeys, right, and our walk, and um, for some, it's going to be faith. Um, for me, it's becoming the best version of myself. Um, Meditation is really important to me. Alignment and things that are important to me is like really high up there for me, and being able to really experience joy. Um, and it's just so wild to me that although the journeys look different and the timing is different and there's a lot,
Yeah.
it's the same journey,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
It's the same journey. And for you, you're very much now living out loud in your faith. And this is a very brave thing for you to do, to come and tell the world that what you believe and how important it is for you. Um, and so, number one, thank you so much for that.
Absolutely.
It really, it matters. I hope if somebody's listening and they're afraid to profess whatever they believe, that you know that there are two humans in the world who are out there professing what they believe in, even when it's scary, and even if it doesn't always feel super safe.
Yeah.
It's so important. One of the last things I want to touch base on is that through your life you've had a lot of ups and a lot of downs. There's been a lot of hard, there's been a lot of good, right? Like you have lived a very full life, and you shared a little bit of that with us. um, when you think about the fullness of that life, um, how do you prioritize taking care of yourself in the future? Not just um, not just the 5 minutes you spend in the morning, but how do you start to then shift that mindset, knowing that you show up differently when you align with your own beliefs? But how do you start to shift that into and still live that very full life, but start to shift it into what Amy wants life to look like, not what life demands of Amy?
Yeah. Well, again, this comes back to my faith and it comes down to surrendering, right? For me, it comes down to surrendering what and getting out of the way. It's really not what I want. It's about what God has already designed for my life. And I recognize that not everyone may be, faith based, but for me, it really is. I can't even explain how great the things are that when I get out of the way and fully surrender, um, that God sends my way. And so for me, it's continuing to surrender my own will and my own desires, fleshly desires, for what God really has for my life. And so that's how I continue to show up.
Very cool. We talk a little bit about, so Amy and I are both very strong personalities, strong-willed humans. We joke that it's Amy's way or Marissa's way, and we're very good at making our own way. When you talk about surrender, I don't really know that I know what that means, and I would love for our listeners to kind of understand. But what does surrender mean to you?
So it means like instead of doing what I want to do, like it's instead of getting my feelings hurt, instead of it being about what I want, it's really is that aligned with God's will for my life. And what that means is by reading his word and saying, like, am I supposed to be treating someone this way? Right?
Mm,
Or am I supposed to be feeling this type of way? And so the more that I read the word and the more that I'm aligned with God's will for my life, which is in his word, the better off I am. Instead of me trying to figure out, which I'm really good at doing, figuring it out myself. I am really good at checking the boxes and making a list, and saying, hey, these are the things that I want to do. These are the things that I think need to be done. Check, check, check. Yay, I did a great job. Versus really surrendering and saying, Lord, like, forget what I want to do because it's menial compared to what you have for my life. And so it's praying, being in the word, and making sure that instead of me being sassy
yeah.
and selfish, it's about, aligning my life with his word.
I think a lot of times, whether we use the word like prayer or meditate or get still, whatever the word is, I know that for me, my life is very scheduled. In fact, my very most favorite thing is to be able to have just a normal everyday adventure which just doesn't include a schedule. Like my life is very, very regimented because of business and work and all those things. And so, um, what we don't, this is a blanket statement. I think what most people don't do a good job of is allowing for some space for something to come in, or for opportunity to present itself, or for there just to be nothingness, to see what we hear, or to see what we feel in our body, or to see what kind of comes up in our brain. And I think you do this in prayer, and I get quiet and sometimes I meditate, but I create just a space. It doesn't have to be, I'm like, I'm not awesome at this. Like, I don't sit for an hour and just with nothingness. That I'm working on it. But do you find that when you just sit, and you pray, or you just sit and listen, do you find like a difference, a shift in you?
Oh, 100%. But I have a hard time sitting. Don't get it twisted. Like,
Yeah.
I have a hard time sitting still me. But like if I worship or if I listen to God, like and drain out my own self-esteem. Like if I'm being a brat, if I'm saying mean things, like I hear the voice of the Lord tell me, like, Amy. Now I can either choose to listen to that
Yeah.
or I can choose to continue in my own, but I'm, but I'm right. What I call my self-righteous behavior, right?
Yeah.
but I'm, but I'm right.
Yeah.
Like they're wrong, And so if I can, um, the more I'm able to surrender again to that voice where it's like, God says to me, is that really how you're supposed to be acting? Is that really, a
Mhm.
reflection upon me and my Holy Spirit and what I want for your life? Then, but yeah, so I stopping for long periods of time is difficult for me. So I think it's just more about surrendering in that moment when when I know I'm having a bad attitude,
Yeah.
instead of being stubborn and
Mhm.
going, you know what, I'm okay, I might be right, but who cares, right?
But who cares? Yeah.
That's not what
You
it's about. Yeah.
so you had a drive a few months ago through the mountains, and when you got to Sacramento, you shared a story about that being quiet. Um,
Yeah.
will you share that quiet moment and what that looked like for you?
Yeah, so it was like 2 hours in complete silence, and really that aha moment was just it was about surrendering. It was about, like, I cannot do this. Um, I cannot do this life on my own and in my own strength. Because every single time it has led me down a path of darkness and despair, no matter if there were good things along the way down that, the end result was in darkness and despair. And so, um, but yeah, I usually listen to music or prayer or worship, on long drives. And that particular 2 hour drive from Reno to Sacramento, I literally was just like loud and clear. I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna drown out the noise and be silent. But that's a super rare thing, and it was me digesting the surrender everything, because the Lord even said to me, um, "Are you willing to be broke?" And I went, "Oh, what?" Like, that's a thing, you
Sure.
know?
You worked really hard for the success to not be in this situation. You sure that's what we're working on?
Right. Like yeah, I worked really hard. And so, was I willing? And do I think that's what it's gonna take? Not necessarily, but was I willing?
Were you willing?
Was I willing? And I was like, "Ooh, Lord, yes, absolutely. I'm willing to do whatever it takes, to surrender. And if that's what it means, then that's what it means." But it was the willingness, I think, more than
The
anything.
willingness.
Yeah.
So before we say goodbye, I will ask you, what is one piece of advice that you would love to give listeners?
Well, of course, I'm a woman of faith, so I my piece of advice would be find what that means for you in your life, sooner than later, and that forgiveness is absolutely crucial. And when I say forgiveness, I mean forgiveness when people don't deserve it, when it doesn't feel right, when you might be logically right, okay, and the world has hurt you. Um, there is power in forgiveness. And so, first and foremost, make sure you forgive yourself and
Mhm.
you forgive those that have hurt you, because ultimately you're a child of God.
Forgiveness is really important. So my
Yeah.
challenge to listeners is take a few minutes and get quiet in whatever that means for you. Whether you get quiet in prayer, whether you meditate, whether you just sit there in an empty room for 5 minutes and you just think about nothing. And if a thought comes into your head, put it in a balloon and send it away and try to get still and see whatever that thing is for you. Amy's point, do it sooner than later. Don't wait. The journey when you come into full alignment with whoever you are and whatever the best version of yourself is, there's so much magic awaiting. It does really start with forgiving yourself for maybe not doing it sooner or maybe not living in alignment. And if you screw up and you don't do whatever it is that you're supposed to do on any given day, have patience and grace with yourself because you're doing a great job. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you next week.